welcome back to Actual English. I'm Jennifer Clyde. It is now time for lesson 117, and since we talked about raising children in our previous lesson, let's shift on over to parenting, which happens to be another very important topic, and perhaps a topic you may run into in the future. So when I say parenting, what comes to mind first? Parenting, being a good mother, being a good father, but what exactly is being a good mom and dad? There are different parenting styles, and they say that parents impact their children, child development. So there is a link between parenting styles and the way children develop as well. I did some research on the net, and they say that during the early 1960s, there was a psychologist, and she conducted a study on more than 100 preschool-age students through many different kinds of methods. And she identified 4 important dimensions of parenting. The first one is disciplinary strategies. The next is warmth and nurturance. Communication styles, which I think is very important. Knowing how to communicate with your children. And last but not least, number 4, the 4th dimension of parenting happens to be expectations of maturity and control. Well, I would have to go on for at least 10 minutes to tell you about each and every one of these dimensions. So if you're curious, what you can do is I'll post it up on our webpage along with the script, so check it out. There's a lot of information there. Okay then, let's begin with the first segment. It's time for Actual Talk.
Peter, do you consider yourself a good dad?
I am father of the year.
Really?
Well, I don't know. No, I mean, no matter what you do, you feel like it's not enough. You want to do more,
Aww.
and it's hard because you have to divide your time between work and taking care of the babies.
Well, that's the first sign of being a good dad.
Yourself.
I mean, you're always constantly worrying about your children. You talk about your children all the time.
Yeah,
I think you're a really good dad.
We try. I think the most important thing is to be there.
Do you want to become a father who's like a friend, or do you instill discipline upon your children at a young age?
You need to instill discipline. Of course, I'll be their friend as well, but first I'm their father, second their friend.
Oh, so if your children run around at a restaurant, you tell them to sit down and eat?
We try not to go to restaurants because they will climb all over everything.
What about in the car when you're driving and they're just jumping around in the back seat? Do you tell them to sit down?
They can't jump around in the back seat.
I saw that the other day. I was on the freeway and we were driving, and they were, I don't know, they were in front of us, and the kid was just jumping up and down in the back seat.
I think there aren't any car seat laws in Korea yet. Some people have car seats, but not everybody. It's very strict in the U.S.
Yeah, I think it's strict in Australia as well. You have to have a car seat for each child, and you're not allowed to hold them in the front.
Your lap.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a mother yet, so I really don't know.
So, do you think you'll be a good mother?
That's the thing. I think I'll be a very strict mother.
Oh,
My parents are very strict, so I want to be someone who's more open and more laid back, but I think I'll be like, constantly.
To be honest, I think that being strict is good for your children.
Well, for a certain age.
Well, it gives them boundaries, and of course they're going to rebel a little bit, but they need to have some boundaries to go by before they move out and do things on their own. It's a good learning process, I think.
Interesting, because Joanne asked Peter if he thought of himself or regarded himself as a good father or not. It's true. He's always constantly talking about his children and his family and his wife. So I think, by the looks of it or by the way it sounds, he definitely sounds like a good father, a good husband, and a good family man. Okay, anyhow, let's check out what they mentioned in today's Actual Talk conversation. Here we go. Joanne says, Peter, do you consider yourself a good dad? Consider oneself something or as something means to think of, regard as. So in other words, she's asking Peter, do you think of yourself as a good dad? Do you think you are a good dad? Do you consider yourself a good dad? And then Peter proudly says, I am Father of the Year. We often see Employee of the Month, Employee of the Week, for example. So this is perhaps like an award we give someone. Actor of the Year, for example. So he's saying, yes, I'm proud to say I am a really good dad. I'm Father of the Year. Okay. Now, Joanne says, really? You really think so? And he says, well, I don't know. He's not sure. But he says, because no matter what you do, no matter what you do, you feel like it's not enough. So he's just saying, you could do so many things, but in the end, you may still think, oh, did I do enough? Nothing or nothing is enough. So no matter what I do, no matter what I try, it feels like it's not enough. It feels like there's more that needs to be done. And it's hard because you have to divide your time between work and taking care of the babies. So divide one's time between something. Okay, we'll practice that pattern later on, but basically means to use up your time or even your energy doing things. Okay, so you're using a lot of your time doing A and B. Usually, you would spend time or divide your time and energy doing a certain activity. So he's saying it's hard because you have to juggle the two. You have to be good at both things, okay? Working and taking care of the babies and taking care of yourself. Well, that's the first sign of being a good dad. Joanne, gives him some optimistic, feedback. That's the first sign of something. That's proof of something. That goes to show that you are a good dad. That tells me you're a good dad. And then she moves on saying, you're always constantly worrying about your children. And you talk about your children as well. Okay, worry about them, and he always talks about them as well. I think you're a really good dad. And Peter says, we try. Have you noticed? When he's talking about his family, he always includes his wife. He doesn't say, I try. I take care of the children. I do this at home. But rather he says, we, meaning him and his wife. That's why I said he sounds like a good husband as well. So we in this case means Peter and his wife. They try. My wife and I try very hard. I think the most important thing is to be there. Be there for them. Be there with them. Be there when they need me. Okay? And then Joanne says, do you want to become a father who is like a friend? Or do you instill discipline upon your children at a young age? First of all, the first question is, do you want to become a father who is like a friend? Do you want to become a friend to your sons? I think a lot of fathers do want to be father and a friend sometimes. And then she says, or do you instill discipline? Discipline is, an easy way to say it is self-control. You have a set of rules that you tell your children to follow. You discipline them. Oftentimes, a lot of parents may be strict and they discipline their children. Teach them ways for self-control, okay, upon your children at a young age. Now, instill is just a way of gradually and slowly letting your children learn something, okay? Feel and also remember in their minds, okay? So, he says, you need to instill discipline. Yes, you have to do that. Of course, I'll be their friend. But first, I'm their father, and second, their friend. Okay, so he's made an important point here because he says, yes, discipline is very important. They need to learn how to respect people in all those little things. But I do want to be, number one, a father to them, and then number two, also a friend to my sons. So if your children run around, they're running around at a restaurant, you tell them to sit down and eat? Okay. She could also say, if your children run around at a restaurant, would you tell them to sit down and eat? Okay. He says, we try not to go to restaurants. Because they will climb all over everything. So to avoid his children from running around and causing problems at places like restaurants, he says, we try not to go. We avoid that from happening in the first place. And also, if we go to restaurants with our children, they want to climb everything, okay? And then she says, what about in the car? And they're just jumping around in the back seat. And then she tells a story about what she saw the other day. I saw that the other day. I was on the freeway, on the highway, okay, perhaps she was driving, and we were driving. And in front of us, a kid was just jumping up and down in the back seat. We see this quite commonly. I see it a lot in Korea. Yeah, and it's really disturbing, and I think it's very dangerous as well. But now, once again, she's talking about an experience of hers. How one day, while she was driving, she saw a car in front of her with kids jumping up and down, just crazy in the back seat. And then Peter says, I think there aren't any car seat laws in Korea yet. Not yet, as of now, okay? There could be in the future, but up until now, I don't think there are any car seat laws in Korea. I don't think there is either. I think they're trying to educate people to have car seats in cars for children, but I don't think it is a law, okay? Car seat law. Some people have car seats, some do, but not everybody, okay? Not everybody. It's very strict in the US, meaning, yes, you have to have a car seat in your back seat in the United States. But in Korea, there is still not a car seat law. Now, Joanne says, yeah, I think it's strict in Australia as well. Okay, so it's strict in Australia too. You have to have, meaning you must have a car seat for each child, and you're not allowed to hold them in the front. I do see a lot of people holding their children in the front, sitting in the passenger seat. So there's a driver in the driver's seat and the passenger in the passenger seat, in the front seat. And I do see a lot of moms, for example, or anyone holding their babies like this in the front seat, which is very dangerous. And then he says, in your lap. That's right. Lap is what? L-A-P. It's a body part. Which body part is it? Okay, we're talking about right here, above your knees, okay? That is your lap. So usually when you're sitting in the car seat, in the passenger seat, you hold your baby and let them sit on your lap. That's why a notebook computer is called a laptop computer, because you put it on your lap, okay? So he's saying, yeah, you see a lot of people holding their children in the front seat, in the passenger seat, on their laps. It's so dangerous. So, do you think you'll be a good mother? Okay, now he's asking Joanne the question, do you think you'll be a good mom? And then she says, I think I'll be a very strict mother. Okay, so if you're strict about something, you're really conservative and tough. You go by rules. My parents were very strict. Now she's talking about her parents. So I want to be someone who's more open and more laid back. So she's mentioning that she wants to be strict, okay? She wants to have rules set for her children to follow, but at the same time, she wants to be open so that their children can come to her whenever they want to talk about things, for example, and laid back. Laid back is another word for being really relaxed and carefree, okay? So that's the type of mother she wants to be. Peter says, to be honest, honestly, I think that being strict is good for your children, okay? Being strict is good for your children. It gives them boundaries. Boundaries, we're talking about limits, limitations, lines they should not cross, okay? Of course, they're going to rebel a little, This word is a noun and a verb as well. It's pronounced differently. In this case, it's a verb, so it's pronounced as rebel, rebel. They're not going to go by rules, okay? But they need to have some boundaries to go by before they move out and do things on their own. Now, boundaries need to be followed, okay? If you have boundaries, you have to go by the boundaries. Go by in this case means to follow, such as rules. We go by rules, which means to follow rules. And then he says it's a good learning process, I think. And that's how he ends the conversation. So often kids, they refuse to be controlled. They resist being controlled. And that is rebelling against their parents, for example. Okay, that was a long conversation, so let's have a listen to it one more time.
Peter, do you consider yourself a good dad?
I am father of the year.
Really?
Well, I don't know. No, I mean, no matter what you do, you feel like it's not enough. You want to do more,
Aww.
and it's hard because you have to divide your time between work and taking care of the babies.
Well, that's the first sign of being a good dad.
Taking care of yourself.
I mean, you're always constantly worrying about your children. You talk about your children all the time.
Yeah,
I think you're a really good dad.
We try. I think the most important thing is to be there.
Do you want to become a father who's like a friend, or do you instill discipline upon your children at a young age?
You need to instill discipline. Of course, I'll be their friend as well, but first I'm their father, second their friend.
Oh, so if your children run around at a restaurant, you tell them to sit down and eat?
We try not to go to restaurants because they will climb all over everything.
What about in the car when you're driving and they're just jumping around in the back seat? Do you tell them to sit down?
They can't jump around in the back seat.
I saw that the other day. I was on the freeway and we were driving, and they were, I don't know, they were in front of us, and the kid was just jumping up and down in the back seat.
I think there aren't any car seat laws in Korea yet. Some people have car seats, but not everybody. It's very strict in the U.S.
Yeah, I think it's strict in Australia as well. You have to have a car seat for each child, and you're not allowed to hold them in the front.
In your lap.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a mother yet, so I really don't know.
So, you think you'll be a good mother?
That's the thing. I think I'll be a very strict mother.
Oh,
My parents are very strict, so I want to be someone who's more open and more laid back, but I think I'll be like, constantly.
To be honest, I think that being strict is good for your children.
Well, for a certain age.
Well, it gives them boundaries. And of course they're going to rebel a little bit, but they need to have some boundaries to go by before they move out and do things on their own. It's a good learning process, I think.
Welcome back, everyone. Are you ready for some vocab and patterns for today? It's time for actual expressions. Okay, as you see, these words were taken straight out from today's actual talk conversation, so let's go over them together. There was instill, which means to educate, to implant, or even program into someone's mind, okay? So the child remembers what's right and what's wrong. Instill. Discipline, as I mentioned, could mean punishment. But in this case, we were talking about teaching a child self-control. You're going by certain rules, okay? You're training children with a set of rules. It means to teach them discipline. So control, self-control, or even self-restraint. Teach them discipline. Strict. Parents can be strict. Some are, and some aren't as strict. My mother was really strict. I was so afraid of her. Anyhow, strict. Some synonyms are stern, tough, dead set, which means no matter what, they will not change their mind. Dead set is another word for strict. And inflexible, which is the opposite of flexible. You are not flexible. Inflexible. Laid back, as I mentioned. This is the kind of mother Joanne wants to be, right? Relaxed, unhurried, there's no rush, you're cool about everything. Easygoing. And another slang or informal word or synonym for laid back is lax. Lax means laid back. Well, now that we've taken you through all the vocab words we saw today in today's actual talk conversation, let's move on to some patterns. We've got 3 for you today, and the first one is consider someone something or consider someone as something, which means to think of someone as or regard as. Okay. In the beginning of the conversation, I think Joanne asked Peter if he considered himself a good dad, right? So you can ask somebody, do you consider him a friend? Which means, do you think of him as a friend? Do you regard him as a friend? Is he a friend to you? Okay, let's practice 2 times. Do you consider him a friend? Do you consider him a friend? Do you think of him as a friend? Okay, what about this one? He's considered, he is thought of or thought to be a wonderful husband and father. Okay, so consider, just think. Regard, think of, or think as, okay? He is thought of, or he is thought to be, a wonderful husband and father. He's considered a wonderful husband and father. Now let's move on to our next pattern. Divide. Divide one's time or energy between A and B. It means to use up one's time or to use up one's energy to do different things, such as activities. All right, what about in this sample sentence? Dividing my time between work and family wasn't easy, okay? So if you want to talk about an experience where you had to do both A and B, in this case, you had to take care of work and you also had to take care of family. It wasn't easy. Then you can say, dividing my time between work and family wasn't easy. It was difficult. And another one. I divide my energies. Let's use energy in the plural form with an IES between business and leisure activities. So if somebody were to ask you, so what do you do with your time? What do you spend time doing? Then you can say, well, I spend time doing business and I also spend time doing leisure activities. It's kind of boring, right? So try saying, well, I divide my energies or time between A and B. Let's try the sentence one time together. I divide my energies between business and leisure activities. It means you put in your energies in both your work, business, and leisure activities. Okay, let's now move on to our final pattern. Go by something, okay? Go by, which means to follow in today's actual talk conversation. So for example, you can say, it's difficult. It's hard for kids to always go by the rules. It's hard for children to always follow the rules, okay? Let's try it one more time together. It's hard for kids to always go by the rules. It's hard for kids to stick to rules, right? They often break the rules. What about in this case? There are rules to go by in this house. As a parent, as a mother or a father, you can say, you have to go by the rules. I have rules. Follow the rules. You can also say, there are rules to go by in this house. It means you must follow those rules. Okay? Okay, that about does it for today's actual expressions. Hope you had a good time.